Okay, all you Batman fans out there, you are listening to the Night of the Batman, and this is Jim Starland, who had a little bit to do with Batman along the way. Have a good one.
Hey guys, this is Night of the Batman. I'm Alex, and I'm here today with.
This is Ben One. Again, I'm kind of guest co-hosting. I'm from the Superhero Stuff You Should Know podcast. I've had the pleasure of interviewing Sam Hamm and Daniel Waters, and now both Alex and I have the honor of interviewing the third official writer of the Burtonverse, and that is John Jackson Miller of Batman Resurrection.
Nice.
How you doing?
Welcome.
I never heard myself called that before. The third official writer in that universe. I would think Craig Shaw Gardner counts for sure.
Oh, that's
And
true. That's true.
yeah, and then I think didn't Denny do the comic book adaptation? Denny O'Neil. I can't remember who it was, but
Well,
but
I was thinking
yeah.
more your
So
own
yeah,
story of it, your
oh,
own
that's
story
true.
as opposed
That's
to
true.
adaptation. Yeah,
Nice.
awesome. Alex?
All right, yeah. So, thank you for coming on, obviously. Really great to have you. So I guess we just go ahead and we'll get into some of these questions here. So we're gonna start off from the very beginning, John. Not the beginning like when you were born or anything. Like we're not we're not starting there. We're talking about like your career. So my first question for you is take us back to the early years of your career and becoming a writer. Where did you start?
Well, I started buying comics or having them bought for me at age 6, and I started drawing my own comics at the same time. I was a terrible artist, but at least I learned how panels and things went, and that ended up being education for me later on when I did become a comics writer. I would also do my own stories first on a typewriter, then a computer, and I was doing a fanzine of my own in high school, and and then I discovered Comics Buyer's Guide, which was the weekly newspaper of the business in the 80s. And I discovered that there was a section in back where people were trading their mini comics that they had done, the little 8.5 by 11 folded over comics that they had drawn, and I got into part of that community as well in high school and in college. I was the editor of my campus newspaper in high school and then at the University of Tennessee, and that is actually kind of where my path crosses with Batman 89, because I had been certainly I'd really been I was just yesterday I was on a Marvel podcast, which was fine because I had been a Marvel zombie growing up.
Hmm.
I didn't really dig into DC until we had Teen Titans basically as the gateway drug into DC, the because it was sort of the equivalent book to Uncanny X-Men back at that time. And then of course we've got Frank Miller, who has gone from Daredevil over to DC to do Ronin and then to do Dark Knight Returns. And so I've definitely gotten into all of that. I am familiar enough by that point with the history of comics and all the things that we've kind of gone through. The comics code, the Senate hearings in the 50s,
Mhm.
and really the impact of the 1966 TV show on just the public view of what comics were. They had an impact on the comic book industry itself. Batman had never been number one at DC or in the industry before 1966, before that TV show hit. And I know this because I run Comicron, which is the website with all the sales figures going back eons. But it was that TV show and that fad that sort of did it. Now, the thing is that fad sort of imploded like everything else did, and unlike Star Trek, which came out in the same year, Batman did not thrive in that period in the 70s and into the 80s. I think 1986, is it 85? No, 85. Batman is the number 32 comic book in the business. So it never was number one again after that 1 year. It would become number one after all of this once we get into the the 90s and everything else. But the thing is, there was this sort of two-tier thing happening with Batman. Us in fandom, collectors like me, we're familiar with the sophisticated, take that we've got in Year One and in Dark Knight Returns and in Alan Moore's Killing Joke. And at the same time, the general public still thought that Batman was about Adam West and Burt Ward, and still thought that I note that in April of '89, when the New York Daily News did its newspaper report about Marvel being bought out by Ron Perlman, the investor, not the actor, but the investor. The headline was Biff Pow Bam. Yeah. And so many of the articles about comics over all those years had been couched in that 60s lingo, stuck there really. Holy investment, Batman. Comics are worth lots of money now, or whatever it is. and it tended to make people think that what we were doing was juvenile. There really hadn't been any comic book movies that had shown us in a great light. Superman, obviously the two films that we got were, they were obviously the best we'd had, but they were also a mixed bag. And then we just get right back into, Superman 3 and 4. Superman 4 was the most recent comic book movie, I think, out at the time that Batman '89 happens. Howard the Duck over at Marvel. This is things are not spectacular. So what was happening in '89 for fans like me is we were very worried that things were going to go wrong with this picture. And in Comics Buyer's Guide, I just did a thread on Blue Sky and Threads and the Bird site, where I dug up all the Comics Buyer's Guide letters, where people had problems with the idea of Michael Keaton, problems with the idea of Tim Burton, problems with the idea even of Jack Nicholson. The quote was, "I do not think he can take the Joker seriously." And I'm like, what does that mean? But it is fun to laugh about it now. But I actually redacted the names from those letters because a lot of those people went on to be important people in comics. And I did not want, you don't want to be blamed for the fears that we all had at that time, because we were starting to worry in the '80s. There were a lot of articles about, will there be a second comics code to deal with the fact that, there's, the comic shops can get around the comics code? Will there be some sort of a new board? Will there be something else? Will the government get involved? And the problem was that there was this disjoint between what was really happening in comics and what people thought comics meant. And so we're definitely concerned. And I was concerned. I was editing my college newspaper at the University of Tennessee and the Daily Beacon. And there was nothing to do in the summer of 1989. I was terrified that the movie would not be any good, but I had nothing else to do that summer. Because we were only publishing twice a week and there wasn't anything going on. And so I assigned myself movie reviews, and I assigned myself, the Batman movie review. And I showed up just very worried about this thing. And I get there and it turns out, people are in costume. This is that sneak preview Thursday night before it went everywhere. People were in costume, people were in Joker makeup, people were in these folks, I guess they knew each other, had a big black bed sheet that they had holes cut in so that they could actually put their heads through it and drape it over the seats. And of course the movie happens and the music rises and Danny Elfman's theme, and we get the first look at Anton Furst's Gotham City, which is not a real city. it's something different. It's something nobody has ever seen before. Prince has the first line in the movie on a boombox or a passing car, and
right.
it's just a different thing. And we got to the end of the picture, and I said to myself, while everybody was cheering, having seen Batman at the top of the building, everybody's cheering. I said to myself, and I ended up putting it in just about everything I would write about it later was that there we go. Batman remains true to legend. What I thought was, this movie has just redeemed comics in the popular culture, not just saved Batman. It saved the whole idea of comics, and it made possible all sorts of movies that followed. They greenlit all kinds of things that they would never have considered before because of this. And so, that was my first brush with writing about Batman. And this movie was there in 1989. So I was there at the time. I ended up going 12 times. I have the ticket stubs.
Wow.
And one of the things that I had in those reviews, because I ended up doing 2 reviews of it, I had questions about the movie. Because once you see it 12 times, it's like, okay, yeah, what about this moment? What about that moment? Where did they come from? What is all this here? And I developed theories over the years that just were not going to get to go anywhere, until we get to 1993. Because I had a journalism degree, I ended up going to work for the company that did Comics Buyer's Guide. So I worked with Don and Maggie Thompson. I was the editor of the trade magazine Comics Retailer. So I'm writing about the business. I'm writing about the comics industry. I'm not necessarily writing about the characters or anything. But then I start doing things for Comics Buyer's Guide, including I did a piece for the I think the 10th anniversary of the movie. I did a piece on Prince's soundtrack, or his album rather, and I did various other things, sort of tying into it, and I end up making the jump from basically being behind the camera to being in front of it. I got an offer to do a series for Marvel. I did a book called Crimson Dynamo that led to me getting Iron Man, and I did Iron Man for a year. So that's my first brush with billionaire superheroes. And then that led me to Star Wars at Dark Horse, where I wrote the Knights of the Old Republic comic series. That led to me getting to write short stories and then later novels for Star Wars. And then you throw in Star Trek, and then finally here in this last year, I kind of had this trifecta here where the day that I was launching, I was actually heading to the launch party for my most recent Star Trek novel, which is the first Strange New Worlds novel called The High Country. I'm on my way to that when I hear from my editor, Tom Holler at Random House, and says, we'd like you to do a novel about the Jedi Council. And I said, oh, great, for the 25th anniversary of Phantom Menace. And so that became my most recent Star Wars novel that came out 3 or 4 months, or it's 5 months ago now, which is The Living Force. The trade paperback of that literally came out yesterday as we're recording this. And I'm halfway through that, and the same editor, Tom, says, didn't you see Batman in the theater 12 times? And I said, yeah. He says, well, we've got the rights to do Batman novels tying in with the Tim Burton movies, not Batman in the current movies, not Batman in general, not even the 90s version, the 80s 90s version with the other 2 movies in there. This is just the Burton movies. And I couldn't stop screaming because I was like, all right, yeah. I wrote at the time, I would call this a dream project, but I never dreamt it was possible that there would be a license for just these 2 movies. and that resulted in Batman Resurrection, which came out in October, and we've already announced the next one, so which is Revolution, which comes out next fall.
Was there so just branching off that, like being such a big fan and that being such like a big deal to you, was there any like hesitancy with like maybe tackling the world or anything? Were you just ready to go,
Not
basically?
even a little bit. Not even a little bit. I mean, I had to go frame through a couple of scenes because one of the things we deal with is the aftermath of the Joker's reign of
Mhm.
terror. And so I had to go back through and see which ones of his henchmen survived. And so I did have to frame through scene by scene. And I'm like, okay, yeah, he probably lived through that. The guy that fell down the bell tower, yeah, he didn't he didn't live. So and it's the unusual Batman movie where you have to worry about whether somebody died or not. But that was again a decision that Burton made, which was that he was wanting to tie into the 1930s version of Batman, the Golden Age version of Batman, Batman with a gun who's running around shooting vampires, just not really dealing with some of these other issues out there. That was basically my guiding light here. So,
Mhm.
when I introduced new villains into Batman Resurrection, I really thought all along, well, how would Burton have done it? How would they have done
Mhm.
it in 1990? What would it have looked like? Because they wouldn't have had practical effects.
Yeah.
In a sense, I don't want to say that this is a novelization of a movie that didn't exist, because the book is a lot longer than I think a movie would be. Novels, the adaptations of Batman and Batman Returns are really only about 60 or 70% as long as this novel.
Mhm.
And it's just a different tempo when you're doing a full length novel, these days. So, this is closer to like a 6 episode TV arc or something like that, or a 2-part movie or 3-part movie or something like that. But yeah, I mean that's kind of the way I approach it. I'm like, if we had been able to do novels in the
Mhm.
Tim Burton, space in 1989, in 1990, I thought, what would it be like if you got a book in the fall of 89 or for Christmas 89
Mhm.
that was aware of everything that happened in Batman Returns, that was aware of it, which is not possible because they
Yeah.
didn't have it written yet, or was aware of everything that happened in Batman, which Craig Shaw Gardner was not aware of what was in the final cut of the movie, which is why you've got
Yeah.
a lot of scenes in the book that conflict
Mhm.
with the film. Um, so that's kind of the way I took it. And you mentioned Sam Hamm at the top. Sam, one of the two screenwriters of the movie, he had, I think, had a lot to do with making this possible, because DC had already done Batman 66 comics,
Mhm.
years ago. And I remember at the time I talked to DC's editor that line saying, "Hey, if there's ever a chance to do Batman 89, let me know." And he said, "Yeah, you're like the 40th person to ask that, and you're not going to be on the first of the list." Well,
Ouch.
yeah, and it turned out they didn't do anything, but they
Mhm.
did do it in the early 2000s with Sam, and the artist is Joe Quinones. Joe was the artist on a lot of my Star Wars covers at
Ooh.
Dark Horse. And they staked out for themselves in they're now in the middle of their second miniseries.
Mhm.
Their stories are all taking place during a period. It's more than a year after the end of Returns.
Mhm.
And so when I did the first conversations, the first conference calls with my editor and Warner Brothers and DC, it was like, okay, I'm gonna stay away from that. I want to hug the first movie. It's the thing most people saw. It's
Mhm.
the thing most people are familiar with. I want to go almost, not immediately after it, but it's a direct sequel to that novel, or to that movie rather, the novel is. And then my second book likewise fits into that inner movie space.
It's like in betweequel, basically. Like,
Yeah, well, if you think about it, I mean, look how many novels and comics Star Wars put between Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back, which is also a 3-year period.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can do a lot. There is absolutely no reason to use all that space up or use all the story opportunities up. But I did go for a number of things in this book, and as you say, you've read it. You know, I did take the opportunity to show, well, what did characters like Max Schreck think of the Joker?
Yeah.
What did some of these people that we did, just didn't exist yet on the page? How were they impacted by what happened? And what if we had meetings of certain characters? I mean, we never had a conversation between Alexander Knox and Batman. And we get that pretty much right away in this book. So, I'll wait till we get to the spoiler part of this discussion to get into specifics on that. But that's what people can look forward to if they're getting this book.
Cool. So like obviously this isn't one of our questions, but just hearing you talk about this, I'm kind of interested in your response. So Batman doesn't talk a lot in those movies, so like we have a lot of his internal monologue. Was that kind of a challenge for you to try to find that kind of voice for him?
Well, see, that's the thing is, if it were a comic book,
Hmm.
or if it were a movie, he wouldn't say that much.
Yeah.
That was the first thing that I was taught in my very first issue of Star Wars years ago, because I had a Darth Vader story. And the
Hmm.
whole thing there was, yeah, he didn't say much. He a little goes a long way. And that's the thing. But here we're actually in his head. We have his internal monologue
Hmm.
for a lot of the time. And in particular, what I think people are wanting to follow is sort of just the way that he actually plans out his actions in the middle of action scenes. Early in the book, we have a chase that goes across Gotham City where he doesn't have the car,
Hmm.
and he has to constantly, as he's going the next step, he's got to constantly think, okay, which of my tools on my utility belt is going to work,
Yeah.
and what's going to happen to me if it doesn't work, and we get drama from whether that happens. We have where that bag of tricks comes in. I also get into the fun of developing that. We sort of see how the batarangs in Batman Returns come about, things that he's just testing right now.
Yeah.
And we kind of see issues that he's got, which would naturally come about if you're this guy trying to do this thing, just logistical stuff
Hmm.
about, what if I'm here and the car's over there? Or what if my costume's over there?
Hmm.
And we had there's a moment that is in the in the Batman novelization that is not in the movie because they took that scene out,
Okay.
where after the Vicky's apartment scene, in the original script, the idea was that they were going to Joker was going to kidnap Vicky Vale, take her to the park where they're having the bicentennial celebration, and what was going to happen is Bruce was going to go downstairs, change in the back of the limo into a Batman costume, and then he was going to grab a horse from a policeman, and we were going to get this scene. And from what I remember, from what I've read about it, yeah, I think the suit did not test well in the light. It did not
Oh.
look like anything
Huh.
that it looked like a rubber action figure. It didn't look right, and they ended up not doing that, and the movie was running long anyway
Hmm.
at that point, and so they didn't do it. But what I did was I brought back a couple of those moments in here where he's got the issue of, how do I change in the back of a limo? This is not the easiest suit to put on. Also, we get into a thing where, I sort of have a nod to the costume thing where, I come up with, the gray bat suit or a gray bat suit as a solution to the way the suit looks during the daytime. And that, it made sense that he would have, a daytime kit and a nighttime one. And we come up with some technological reasons why it looks the way that it does. I think people dig that stuff. I mean, it's obviously we have interactions between characters, we have action, we have everything else. But a lot of this is, what is it like to be Batman? What is it like to live in a world where Batman exists? And that was something I really valued. We got to actually show, how has Batman changed Alexander Knox's job? How has it changed Commissioner Gordon's job? Do they have anything they can teach him? And then we also get to dig in a little bit into just how this Bruce Wayne is different from all the other Bruce Waynes. So there is a different flavor, I think, to a Michael Keaton Bruce Wayne story. He can be absent-minded, but he's never he's not faking the irresponsible playboy thing as you get in the Nolan movies. We actually have a Bruce Wayne in the Batman Burton movies where he's much more responsible, much more. You see him in Batman Returns, going eye to eye with Max Schreck over the future of the power plant, and he's the mayor and I see eye to eye on this. He tosses
the file at him.
So you get and again he's sort of lackadaisical, indifferent about it, but obviously he's somebody who wields some power, and that's one of the things we do in the book is we show him acting in ways in which Bruce Wayne can solve some problems that Batman can't.
Nice. Ben, you want to take the next one?
Well, I mean, a lot of my stuff is more spoiler stuff, so should we
Okay.
draw the line here?
I have one more thing, Ben, if you
sure.
want to this is one of yours, but I guess I could ask this now before we delve into that. So I've noticed, John, that you seem to gravitate a lot to genre fiction, especially science fiction. Are those like favorite genres of yours? Is that why you kind of gravitate to that?
Well, almost everything I do is media tie-in. So, Star Wars, Star Trek. I'm working in somebody else's sandbox. I own exactly one book out of all of the comics and all of the novels that I've done. And I've done things, I have done, I did a Conan issue at one point. I've done Simpsons. I've done some various other things. And even within what you would call science fiction, I mean, my Kenobi novel back there is a Western. I've got my Enterprise War book is actually military science fiction. My Die Standing novel for Discovery, that's a spy novel. So you're able to actually do some different kinds of things. My most recent book, The Living Force for Star Wars, that's actually a vacation novel. It's a road trip. Nice. So it's the Jedi on spring break, more or less. So and so there's a comedy element to that. But I tend to work in these different other franchises. However, there is I do prefer to actually sort of wrestle with how the world works in kind of a more of a hard science fiction nature where it's possible. Star Wars, you do not ever get into the why and how and everything of why the hyperdrive isn't working. It just doesn't. But Star Trek, you can actually throw around some quantum mechanics and things like that if you want to actually do it. My advisor, my advisor list on that the most recent novel, the Strange New World novel, High Country. I've got the senior scientist from Fermilab, Don Lincoln, who helped with the particle physics part of it. I've got another friend who is Michael Wong, who is with the Carnegie Institute, helped me on the planetary development. And I had another friend who was Beth Canan, who is an equestrian expert, where she's worked with breeders and everything, helping me on the horses in this particular book. So I try to do that kind of thing. When I did Iron Man years ago, I had made him Secretary of Defense. So we had all this military equipment, and Marvel actually kind of pitched me as Tom Clancy of comics, because all the military stuff was real, all the political stuff was real, and that was what I tried to do. Now with Batman, this was a trick, because this is something where it's set on Earth. So unlike most of what I've done recently, and it's on Earth, and it's also a very peculiar kind of Earth, because it's 1989, except for the people it's not 1989 for. So we have in the Tim Burton snow globe kind of world that he's got, we have this sort of mishmash between the golden age, and people are dressed in trench coats and fedoras and things like that, and yet you do have more or less what I would call the player characters, the people of name, like Alexander Knox. He has a tape recorder, a micro cassette recorder, just like I did at that time. You have Bruce and Vicky are wearing very modern attire for the time. She has an apartment that looks like it is right out of right out of fashion magazine at the time. And of course Bruce's technology is always ahead of everybody else's. So when I'm doing this book, I had to do a number of legwork things, just research wise, because I had never really had to cope with things like how do firefighters respond to a burning building? How does a body decompose? How do autopsies work? How heavy is a traffic signal? These kinds of things that you need to know if you're setting an adventure in this milieu. And again, some things happen that are are fantastic or hard to believe, but at the same time, I kind of am married to that Burton-esque thing, as I mentioned. You wouldn't have had it's no spoiler to say that we have a villain we meet very early, which is our version of Clayface. It is very clear that this is not the cartoon version, the shambling mound, that guy, because they couldn't have done that back then, and I don't think that he would have done it back then. We have a more tragic figure that draws on the original Clayface origin of an actor, and then I did a spin on it, so he's not quite like the Basil Karlo that you knew in those comics. He's not the over the hill actor who's trying to look young again. People will see what the difference is that we do. But again, I figured he would be a tragic figure. He would be a macabre looking character. Tim Burton's movies always have sort of that, that sort of that freak show element to them. So I approached him more like a universal monster, I would say, kind of a figure.
Cool. So guys, this is the moment that if you haven't read the book yet, first off, what are you doing here? Come on, go read the book. It's great. But we're gonna go into spoilers, so here's your warning. Just come back whenever you're done and listen to the rest of this awesome interview. So here's your last chance. Spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. Okay. So, my next question, why Hugo Strange and Clayface? Like why those
Well,
two
well,
specifically?
one of the things that I determined that I would do is, even though we're not absolutely, saying that we're in the same continuity with Batman '89, the comics,
Mhm.
I wanted to make sure that I wasn't repeating anything they were doing. So we were not going to do Billy D. Williams as Two-Face.
Mhm.
Um, they also had already hopped ahead and did Scarecrow, and also we got Harley Quinn in the current story.
Mhm.
And basically, the way that I looked on it is something that goes back. We mentioned Sam Hamm, who's actually he sent me a really nice note on the book, and also
Nice.
Michael Uslan, who has been a supporter of the book, the producer that brought Batman to the screen. He and I had spoken at a San Diego back when I was just doing the journalism thing,
Mhm.
so almost 25 years ago. And he had said that he kind of looked at the first four films as representing the 1930s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, respectively.
Mhm.
So respectively. So, the 30s is Batman with a gun. 40s is the beginning of the Rogues Gallery. 50s is Robin is a much bigger part of it.
Mhm.
And 60s is obviously Adam West and Campy. And that kind of is what you got in that progression of films by accident or otherwise. And what he said at the time, I thought was I thought it was smart at the time, and now I think it's brilliant because he said, yeah, you would presume that if they were to do more movies, you'd eventually get to the 70s, Batman as the detective and Ra's al
Mhm.
Ghul and everybody, and then 80s you would get Dark Knight, and 90s you would get into Bane and these extended Gotham Under Siege storylines you got in the comics in the 90s. And darned if that didn't happen, because that was several years before Batman Begins when we had that conversation. And so when I was looking at this, I'm like, okay, well, since I'm in between Batman and Batman Returns, I'm right there in that zone where I got to stick to the extent that I can with the villains from the 1930s, 40s, which is really the 1940s, because there wasn't much in the 30s, because it was only the one year there. And I looked at it and I said, okay, Clayface is easily somebody that I think would fit into a Tim Burton movie or a movie like that. It would allow me to go really deep into the world of Gotham City theater, and that would be interesting in and of itself because I could show what that subculture thought of things. And then we had Julie Madison also from the Golden Age, from that period
Mhm.
where she's an actress, so I'm like, okay, I can pull that together. And then as far as Hugo Strange is concerned, I did have that notion also early on that he could be the puppet master. He could be the person pulling the strings. He could corner Clayface into this
Mhm.
position where Clayface is not actually the villain. He's actually a poor schmuck who gets
Yeah.
in over his head. And we have the sort of the chess master here in Strange.
Mhm.
And what I was able to do is I was just sort of able to work my way backwards from what I wanted to have happen and then build it into what I thought would have happened after the end of the first movie.
Mhm.
And that was something I was able to, particularly once DC and Warner Brothers said it was okay for me to explore the possibility that the Joker might not be dead.
Mhm.
And I we were very careful in the marketing not to hit that too hard, because we didn't want people to think, it is on the back of the book, but we didn't reveal the back of the book until a good month before, I think.
I didn't know. I listened to the audiobook. That was a thing. So like real quick,
Yeah.
since it's called Batman Resurrection, I was telling Ben this during the interview. There's a moment in the book where he's like, Hugh Auslander is
Mhm.
saying like, oh, a lot of people think that like this guy looks like me or I'm an ancestor of this guy. I was overthinking it. I thought because resurrection, I'm like, it's Ra's al Ghul,
Oh
obviously,
yeah.
right? Like that's what in my head I was like, that is him. Like I was
Well,
overthinking it.
that's not Golden Age though. So that's I
Yeah.
wouldn't have go. I ended up not going there.
Yeah.
I wouldn't stray too far. I think from that time period. And also with this, I was able to do something that hadn't been done in live action. And so I eventually that's not possible as you continue to do more books.
Yeah.
But in this case, it was like, we got to have the first non-cartoon or non-animated Clayface, and this is the first version of Clayface that is I think, not necessarily heroic, but he's not what he is, and this is again kind of the whole thing is Tim Burton's movies are better understood as characters who are broken in some way, shape, or form, whether it's Edward Scissorhands or somebody who's got an issue, and
Mhm.
whether they can actually to get to some equilibrium, get to some better spot at the end. And in particular, Batman Returns, I think it was Gene Siskel. I have not been able to find the exact quote where he said it was, whether it was in the newspaper or on TV or something, but I'm pretty sure it was he who said that Batman Returns was an opera about loneliness. And,
Cool.
he did say this in his review of it, that you're not really hoping for something major and heroic to happen. You're actually hoping that, gosh, wouldn't it be great if Catwoman could get her act together? Wouldn't it be great if Batman could resolve his issues? Wouldn't it be great if the Penguin could actually? And there's a moment where uh, Bruce Wayne says of the Penguin, "I hope he finds his family."
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
there's some sympathy there. But then there's also the person pulling the strings who is not not redeemable, and of course it's Shrek in that movie.
Yeah.
The Joker is kind of a mixed case, a mixed bag there in his picture. But yeah, I wanted Strange to kind of be that.
Mhm.
And I wanted to do something where, and this is why we've got the spoilers here, is
Yeah.
knowing that he is who he is will now make you read the book the second time completely differently.
Yeah.
And or it should anyway,
Mhm.
because he's got a double game going all the time,
Mhm.
and and he's basically got 4 or 5 plates spinning in the air at any one time.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
Uh,
sure. So
Ben,
I've been holding back because this is not my podcast, so I'm the guest host for this. But
you've been
yeah,
on
I mean,
enough. You're welcome. Come on.
I've been on enough, yeah. So on my show, Superhero Stuff, you should know, we've done a lot of like dives into like the Easter eggs and references to the Burton movies and the '89 comic series that Sam Hamm and Joe Quinones have been doing. And so for this novel, I've been, I was really looking forward to what type of stuff to dive in, and we're currently working on the video essay for that. But before I get into the question, I did want to kind of give praise here that what I was really floored by was just the level of depth to the characters and the world that you've provided here, where it's at a level that I haven't found in the movies that I love and the comic series that I love. But it made sense because this is a big novel, and this is where you get to explore those things. And on the subject of the villains, I feel like this is the best version of the Basil Carlo Clayface. Like it's a fantastic characterization, the motivations. He's sympathetic, and it's done in a way that's different from what we've seen before, even in the famous Batman the animated series. And
Or even
I'm
in the
also
Batman
or
too.
in the Batman
Yeah.
animated series. And I'm also probably one of the biggest Hugo Strange fans on the internet, as people who listen to my show know, I'm big on the Steve Englehart, Doug Mensch era
Yeah.
of Strange, and I've always kind of been of like recent adaptations. I'm just like, you're just kind of using him as like a mad scientist or like the guy who's in
Yeah.
charge of Arkham Asylum. And then I was very happy that he was legitimately a big bad in this and tied in so well with 89, especially with the reveal of how he is connected to the 89 movie, where I'm like, I'm never going to watch that same way. That whole like, yes, sir.
Well,
Yeah.
that was a moment of opportunity I saw.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I appreciate hearing that. You know, Steve Englehart's a friend, and you know, he and I were actually talking while I
Oh,
was actually
awesome.
writing the book,
Nice.
and you know, he has a connection to this film before anybody
Yeah.
else does.
Hmm.
So yeah, I will say. You know, as far as the depth that I take these things in, it's what you get in one of my books. So, you know, whether are a fan of Star Wars or Star Trek, the books that I've done for them are very lived-in universe kind of things.
Mhm.
You are in Living Force, which is a novel about the 12 Jedi counselors, you know, from the year before the Phantom Menace. Even though with the cases of many of these characters, they've never even spoken on screen before, in animated or anywhere else, and I'm establishing their characters, I realized that I had to show them like they had known each other for 10, 20, 100, 200 years. And so we're actually getting the middle of their arguments. And we can tell who likes each other and who doesn't, and who's just putting up with who and everything like that. And then we're also I'm dealing with the politics of a world that, you know, the Jedi are in decline in, and where the Republic is corrupt, and
Mhm.
I'm setting up, you know, the situation before the Clone Wars. Um, and that's kind of what I do in all of my novels. You know, the Kenobi novel, it's, you know, 90% of it is from the point of view of other people who see Obi-Wan Kenobi when he moves to Tatooine.
Mhm.
And we get what their world is like, and how it's changed because of what's going on, and how it's changed because he's there. And then Star Trek likewise. You know, you know, my novels, I try to, you know, give you, you know, what it feels like to actually be in that place. And so yeah, I was really happy that we were able to actually pursue some of these things. You know, Alexander Knox, his job has completely changed, I think, because Batman exists. And I figured it out, and I said, you know, he's got to have a different relationship with Batman than he's got with Bruce Wayne,
Hmm.
Mhm.
and Bruce has got to be aware of that. And he's got to be aware that you know, I figured I had a dynamic where Batman could get to know Commissioner Gordon, and Bruce could get to know Alexander Knox, and trade information
Mhm.
in a way that Batman would never cooperate with Knox himself, or he would be afraid to cooperate with Knox himself, because he knows that he knows that no matter what, Knox is a journalist. Knox is looking at the next story. He's looking at, even though he, you know, cares more about what happens to Vicky than just about anything.
Mhm.
You know, he definitely knows. Yeah, he's the news about the Joker. He just can't let that hang out there. He's got to
Hmm.
do something with it. And then likewise, you know, we have a very different Commissioner Gordon that than all the other ones. This is probably the oldest Commissioner Gordon that we have in any iteration, the Pat Hingle one,
Mhm.
in any iteration, because he's a guy who's almost at the end of his career. And so I decided that, from the little that we see Batman interacting with Commissioner Gordon, very little in Batman Returns. Um, we get the notion that it's very collegial. We get the notion that there's absolutely no wall between them in terms of level of trust. And Batman would not have been there at this point yet. He would still be very cautious because he's breaking the law. He's breaking all sorts of laws with everything he does. But but clearly, he has earned the trust of Gordon to a degree, and he doesn't want to lose that. And so we do have scenes like we have in the book where Gordon would probably actually try to teach Batman something or two in this book, because he's been around for a long time. He's had cases that drove him up the wall. He is going through some of the same things, or Batman is going through some of the same things that Gordon would have gone through over and over and over again as a detective. And so, Gordon has some things to teach him. Alexander Knox has some things to teach him. I think Vicky has some things to teach him about being human. And then the most important, piece of this puzzle is Alfred. We loved every moment of Alfred. We did a scene, you probably remember, where it's just the two of them having breakfast at 3 p.m, which probably happens a lot, and they're just going through the newspaper. And my editor was like, "Can we do the whole book this way?" Because it allows me to do what I tend to do pretty well, or at least I feel I do pretty well, which is I'm a mimic in terms of I can imagine dialogue, and then I figure out how would Michael Goff have said this? How would somebody else have said this? And what you mentioned earlier was a bit of a challenge, in that I could not have Bruce be as quiet as he was in the movies. He had to talk because we're with them for hundreds of pages. And so, it's Batman that doesn't talk very much. And but when Bruce is with Alfred, he talks quite a bit.
Yeah, he's most comfortable with him.
Yeah,
makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Along the lines of you saying, talking about mimicking the voices, which is, something that proved very true when we were reading this. We did have to ask if, given that this is set during the 89 and 90 era, if you had any of your author cast for the newer characters you've brought into this world, whether that's Hugo Strange, Clayface, Julie Madison, or we'll just refer to him as Norman Pincus.
Well, yeah, the one, Norman, I'll let hang out there until we're promoting the next book, because he's definitely mentally cast in my mind.
We'll talk next year.
We'll talk next year. Hugo was never anybody in my mind hearing him, but Christopher Lee. So, and because I was also looking at, well, who would have been available at the time? Who would they have cast at the time? Who would Tim Burton have wanted to work with? And of course, he would end up working with them. Yeah. And so if you want to think about it, in at the same time, pretty much as this book, you've got Christopher Lee as the mad scientist in Gremlins 2: The New Batch, and he's in the lab coat and everything. And I just sort of I grabbed that JPEG and I'm like, okay, that's him, and that's who I'm going to imagine, and that's who I'm going to describe. Now, Clayface, we lose Clayface's face almost immediately, and I began to think that it was more important that he be anybody, that he be able to transform into anybody. He's a bigger guy than a lot of actors, because he has to have the frame. One of the things I want to make sure is, we're only using Smilex, and what we saw Smilex could do in terms of changing somebody's face. That's the only fantastical thing that we have in this, is we have this crazy chemical that does things to people really, really fast. And so, but it was not going to add 100 pounds to a guy. It was not going to do that. And so, he had to be somebody, and we went back and forth on it. We had a lot of different, possible ideas, just, and again, this was all unofficial. On the audiobook side, the audiobook narrator ended up going with his own interpretations of characters, because you really just can't do a Jack Nicholson impression for 15 hours. Who can? But I remembered, I probably bounced around from, well, really tall guys would have been people like Ron Perlman, not that Ron Perlman, but the other Ron Perlman, who actually ended up being Clayface in the cartoons. Or somebody you think, well, somebody with a craggy face or something like that, who's very artsy and serious, like Willem Dafoe, but Willem isn't that tall, and so you're going over all these possible things. Nicolas Cage, who would they have let him actually, who would they have let him actually cast? And it almost certainly would have been somebody way out of the realm it's not necessarily the case that it would have been A-list most famous actor or whatever at the time. So I decided in my own mind to just sort of let that sit. And his voice is rarely his voice when he's talking in the book anyway. I really do like what Will Dameron, the narrator, did with him in the audiobook. He's a very personable guy, and he needed to be, because I think we spend more time with him than anybody else in the book. And I might include Batman in that.
Yeah. Sometimes it's difficult to cast Clayface, I feel, because half the fun of it is him being other people. It's almost more fun, in my opinion, for other actors to be in a Clayface story where you're playing Clayface pretending to be Gordon or Clayface pretending to be Batman, as opposed to like the shapeshifter himself.
Yeah.
And also, as I'm writing the book, he got more and more sympathetic. And your characters will eventually tell you who they are. And I realized, okay, he's going to be somebody who's made some mistakes, but he had a really, really bad year.
Yeah.
Alex, you want the next question?
Sure. So what, if any, challenges did you run into while writing the book?
Challenge as well. I had not actually figured that I was going to be doing a book when I was doing a book, because I had back-to-back conventions for 2 weeks in a row. So, there's the entire scene where they're on the interstate, and Batman is chasing. Batman is in the Batmobile chasing Clayface. That was written in hotel rooms. So
Nice.
I prefer not to do that if I can help it. But so obviously that's a logistical challenge. That's not necessarily a story challenge. I did want to, I was constantly, one of the things that you're doing in a book like this is you've got a big outline and you're trying to get from scene to scene to scene. But there are a lot of scenes that you haven't actually sketched out yet. The whole thing with that scene itself, where they're trying to steal the equipment from police lockup, the Joker's equipment. I don't think I had the major beats of that figured out until I got to it. A lot of the action scenes are like that, where I did know that we were going to end at the cathedral. That just made sense, and that rhymed with everything else. We needed to tweak several times the Batman or the Bruce's dream sequences, because as dream sequences go, his nightmares, some of them are kind of long, and so in another book I would have put a page worth of it, and I would have put it in italics or something like that, and we would have known right away that we were in a dream because it's got the different styling. In this, couldn't do that because these are longer and you can't have multiple pages of italics. And what I wanted was and my editor, guided me to where he thought the best places for this would be. That after the first one, he would catch on really soon to, yeah, I'm in a dream. Yeah, I'm in a dream. This is not happening. By the time we're at the third one, it's like, yeah, this isn't real at all. And then we finally get another one of those sequences with the only place where the real Joker sort of talks to us from beyond the grave at the end. But again, those are things where you're doing that kind of fine tuning of the book all the way through.
Mhm. Nice.
Nice.
Ben?
One of my favorite chapters is loaded with the Easter eggs and references, which is the ones where we see the different reactions
Yeah, that's
of
the
people
one.
across Gotham. And I never thought I would see the name Drake Winston at the Royal Auto Body in in print, but then I got to that chapter. I'm like, oh, okay, we're obviously
Yeah,
having connections
yeah.
to the Batman '89 Shadows series, and I guess my next question, and you can let us know if this is giving anything away on your end, but uh, obviously, given the fact that you have different creative teams with Sam Hamm and Joe Quinones doing their take set in the future, and you're doing these novels
Yeah.
set at a different point, there's going to be some overlap, and there currently is a little bit of that, considering that in the current comic arc, there is a Hugo Strange who is sort of seen in some flashbacks with a different role, and there's another villain who's introduced who also seems to share the same alter ego as the villain who's teased in this. Is there going to be sort of a thing where, hey, like, you know what, like this is just a choose your own
Well,
adventure in continuity, or is
well,
it one
no. Well,
where
first of all, we've never actually said that it syncs up. However, I do
Mhm.
my best to make it sync up.
Mhm.
We establish at the end of this book that Hugo is probably not going to stay in Blackgate. He's probably going to wind up in Arkham, and he might actually be seeing patients before too long. And so we get a that I drive him kind of up to that door, because at that point I did know that he was be showing up in Echoes, and I'm like, okay, it only cost me a line or two to say that at the end, and
Mhm.
that's all it takes.
Mhm.
That's literally all it takes. And once Echoes is done,
Mhm.
with the second book, there's some finessing that I can do, and I know the character in the issue that you're talking about. I can tell you it's not an issue.
Oh.
And so yeah,
And there's
believe
different
me.
names, so I'm like, maybe there's more than
Well, I
one,
mean,
you know.
yeah, there's all sorts of ways to do it,
Yeah.
and we chose one of them. So
Sweet.
but one of those things is, again, look, whether it syncs up perfectly or not. And I come from Star Wars, where we had multiple versions of various things, and the Mandalorians were both a species and a movement, and the Sith were both a species and a movement, and over in Star Trek, the story of what happened on the Farragut to Captain Kirk was told in three different novels, three different ways. And yet, when I referred to it, I found a way to name check all of those stories in some way, shape, or form. Yeah, and so I will, at least, no matter whatever happens, I always try to I try to make everything work if possible, and then I try to at least acknowledge the other thing if I can. I'm never going to actually, make a story be entirely about getting from point A to point B in continuity,
Mhm.
because a story is about more than just these connections.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so again, that is kind of why I've said, I I'm working to avoid conflict where I can. It's very difficult, though, obviously, when you have multiple projects in different media going at the same time. Some things you end up having to repair retroactively.
Mhm. Nice. So just going off that, in one scene, Gordon gives Batman the laughing bag that was on Joker's corpse at the end of the 89 film. Was this because of the bag's appearance in the Batcave in The Flash, or was this just a coincidence?
Well, it was always part of my, because I had a theory for how the Joker could have lived back in those days, and I think I may have even mentioned it in Comics Buyer's Guide in one of my columns at one point in the 90s. And the laugh bag was part of it. But I also, having seen The Flash, I'm like, okay, well, he gets it somehow, might as well be now. And again, this is one of those other things. And people, have to understand, it's, we never said, nobody ever said that what's in The Flash, and actually scratch that. Let me step back and say this. I don't speak for DC. I don't speak for Warner. But I know as a viewer that nobody ever really said that this has to be this particular strand of spaghetti all the way through, because that's the metaphor they hear. We might have the future Batman 89 might not be exactly the one that we see in The Flash. And my version might not be exactly the one you see in 89, Batman 89. It could well be that something comes along in the future where they're able to do a AI, or not AI, but a digital version of everything that happened in between Batman and Batman Returns, and I might wind up on a different strand of spaghetti myself. So again, look, all that's important is kind of the order in which to read things. And I did feel like, okay, I wanted to show various other people around Gotham City. I knew that I was not going to be doing anything with Drake Winston substantially. But likewise, I knew in this book I was not going to be able to do anything with Selena Kyle other than a couple of scenes. But I felt like it wasn't just fan service putting them in there. It was more, and also with Barbara Gordon, it was more, hey, let me broaden the world a little bit and bring in some of these peripheral players. And if people want to see more about them, hey, we got comics, go get them.
There you go.
Nice. Yeah.
So
I've always
Ben,
kind of thought that The Flash, I've told people, because some people are just like, does this line up in continuity with the Burton films or not? I'm just like, to me, it is a possible future for that Batman, but not necessarily the future
Oh yeah.
for him, especially with all the timeline shenanigans going on.
Yeah,
So
and
that's how I see it.
stylistically, it already doesn't feel like it, just because we actually see them leave Gotham City, which never happens in the Burton movies. And we see Batman out in the daytime, and once again, this is just not something we see.
you're
This suit lights better in the daytime.
Yeah, there was a going back to the suits for a second. There was kind of like you had the camouflage suit. It definitely kind of reminded me of those Kenner kind of
Yeah,
eras where they had like the what's it like the deep dive? What has it been? The deep
There's
dive
Deep Dive
Batman
Batman,
and
there's Quick
stuff like
yeah,
Change
that.
Bruce Wayne.
He knows all of them. Just yeah, but
yeah. There you go. Well, no,
yeah.
I just figured once again, this is I can't go way beyond 89 technology, so this is not
Mhm.
not holographic stuff. But I did look up what was available back then in terms of refractive and other coatings
Mhm.
that would the whole idea is he's trying to be harder to shoot and trying to be harder to get a beat on, trying to be harder for somebody wanting to take his picture or whatever as well. And you get the notion that if he's out in this thing in daylight and he's moving really fast, it's going to be it's going to seem much more like it's not a strobing flashing figure or whatever. But my thinking was, okay, this is a way to bring the gray suit into it.
There you go. Nice.
And it would have to be lighter. That's the other thing. He
Hmm.
can't be running around. I mean, I think that version of it does not have the full power of the cape. So
Hmm.
it does not have, the veins of the cape, which allow him to, when he goes to the ceiling at Flugelheim Museum, or turning it, in Batman Returns, turning into the hang glider. These it struck me that his daytime, sort of parkour jumping around cape can't be that heavy, can't have all that stuff in it.
Mm-hmm. All right, Ben.
I feel like we kind of covered this question. We did have a couple of the fans of Alex's show have submitted a few questions. One from Brady, asking what inspired your takes on Clayface and Hugo Strange. Now you've kind
Yeah, I
of,
think we hit that.
yeah, you pretty much hit that. Alex, do you want to grab the one from Andrew, or should
Sure.
I, considering that's my co-host?
I got it. I'll take credit for this one. So this one's just totally a joke. Question from Andrew, his co-host on Superhero Stuff You Should Know. Andrew's question is, why is you good at words?
My mother was a grade school librarian, and she didn't make me throw my comics away. She made me put them in order. And
Nice.
so yeah, I learned a lot of words from comics. Stan Lee was famously never wanting to actually talk down to the kids. He'd say, "Go look it up."
Hmm.
And so yeah, I was just reading and reading and reading from an early age, and somehow, I will say, as a broader thing,
Hmm.
having had parents that made sure that I had this stuff around. I didn't grow up amid any real hardships, and I have an older sister who basically introduced me to all the pop culture stuff. She made sure I got in to see Star Wars. My Kenobi novel is dedicated to her for making sure her little brother got in to see the movie.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and so, yeah, to a degree, I feel like what I've been doing over the years is, yeah, giving something back for people who need, to get away for a while. And now at this point, yeah, it also helps me get away for a while to actually do the books. And again, I'm about to get really away with Batman Revolution, because the outline's done. I'm starting work on it, and
Nice.
it's good to have the books come out or it's good to have the books in production in the winter,
Hmm.
because I live in Wisconsin and we have a lot of it.
Nice. So, Ben, unless you had any other just fleeting questions, I was gonna go ahead and do our plugs, and then we can wrap this thing up. And did you have any more, or?
I mean, it's not like I'm expecting any major spoilers, but anything you want to tease about the next book?
It's called Revolution.
Perfect.
I love it.
And I can say it is a direct sequel to this novel. So it is not after Batman Returns or anything like that, because that would be a mistake. I mean, there's room for plenty of stories in there. So
Yeah.
so
We can
this is
also
another.
confirm that Batman is in it.
Oh, I hope
So,
so.
yeah.
Yeah, me
Uh,
too.
All right, Alex.
All right, cool. So I guess I'll go first with my plugs, and then Ben, and then obviously Mr. Miller. So
mhm.
me first. I'm Alex. You guys know me. I have Night of the Batman. Normally I host this show with my wife. I occasionally have other people on, like Ben. But yeah, we talk everything Batman. We go into the comics, the movies, scripts, basically anything I can get my hands on. I also have Flashbacks, a Flash rewatch podcast where we tackle a little bit of the 90s show, but also like the CW stuff episode by episode. And then I have Tangential Exchange. Me and my friend get drunk and just kind of laugh and have fun. That's my most laid back show. And then I have What Mean, which is just a review show. Ben?
Cool. So you can find me at Superhero Stuff You Should Know, where we sort of do a lot of the deep dives into stuff related to. I mean, a big fan base is on the Batman '89 Burtonverse type of stuff. We're definitely working on the video essay, kind of diving into the Easter eggs into the Batman Resurrection book. Probably won't be ready until 2025, but that gives people enough time to read through the novel at their own pace. I also do writing with Newverse Creative, where they do audio adaptations of unmade Batman scripts, as well as I've adapted a few comics from there that I set in continuity with the other movies, where they take a few actors who kind of sound like the actors from the movies and bring them into the fold. So maybe there'll be a fan production version of Batman Resurrection that in the future. But
Nice.
as of now, we mainly have a few on there, and then I have an upcoming comic coming up next. Well, I don't know when this is coming up, but the 27th. It will be the second issue of my comic Alter Ego, which is kind of a Batman No Man's Land meets The Departed, about a henchman who goes undercover to take down supervillains.
Oh, very good. Yeah, obviously Batman Resurrection is available in hardcover, audiobook, and ebook right now. Just about to get some copies on my eBay store page, which is Faraway Press is the name of that store. And I always wait a little while before after the book comes out to get signed copies on there. I have the Living Force, the trade paperback of that came out yesterday, so that's available in hardcover, softcover, and that book actually has a map in it, which is kind of cool. We deliberately did not do a map of Gotham City. I looked at it, and I did actually work with the maps that existed for Gotham City, but the Gotham City that is in Batman, the Burtonverse, is Vancouver. So it is. Go look it up. It is the map that you see in the movie is Vancouver. So
Is that
that's
the one where he's looking at the scene where he's in the Batcave, right? And he's looking
well,
at where Access Chronicles
there's
is?
a couple. They're looking for when they're looking for Batman sightings at the newspaper.
Oh,
They actually have a map of Vancouver with the word Gotham City pasted over it, and
that's where it is.
but yeah, and see again, the problem is all of the Gotham cities that we've seen from like No Man's Land and everything else, where there's an actual map.
Mhm.
It looks like Manhattan, where there's an upstate and there's an island and everything, and it's vertical, whereas of course Vancouver is east-west. So and it's also in the wrong coast. But yes, so yes, there's a map on that. The Living Force, the Barnes and Noble Special Edition, actually has a big map poster, which I did for it, which is in color, and that's a lot of fun. We have on the comic side of things, Marvel is re-releasing or reprinting the Knights of the Old Republic. It's back here somewhere. There it is. The big Knights of the Old Republic omnibus. So it's Star Wars Legends Omnibus Volume 1. And that has my entire 57 issue Knights of the Old Republic series. I wrote every page, all 1,344 pages of it. It was the #1 graphic novel at Diamond when it came out 3 years ago. Those books started going for 200, 300 hours.
Wow.
And Marvel is going to a second printing of it, which makes me happy because they will soon have to probably also do the second volume of the omnibus. And it would be nice because that's even though that has all Knights of the Old Republic, all of my Knight Errant and Lost Tribe of the Sith comics would be in volume 2. And if you're going to have volume 2 out, it would be nice for people to be able to get volume 1. So yes, that's I think coming out in March. Batman Revolution is fall of 2025, and that's all the specifics we've given. And if people are looking to find me on my website, farawaypress.com, I have behind the scenes notes on a lot of the things I've done. Not Batman yet because I haven't had time to write it up, but that's eventually where all the director's commentary trivia will be. I have I'm on social media on Blue Sky. I'm farawaypress.com, Threads, Instagram, Facebook. I'm John Jackson Miller. On whatever the bird site is called this week, I am JJM Faraway. And then I also run the website comicron.com, which is sales charts from over the decades. And there's also there are social media feeds for all of those, and even a Patreon.
Nice. Cool. Great stuff. So I told you earlier, we don't really have an outro here, but we're going to try to line this up as best we can. After I say 3, 2, 1, we'll come up with an outro eventually. So I'll just go ahead and start. Everybody ready? Ben, are you ready?
Yes.
All right. So 3, 2, 1, we will
come up
with
with
an
an outro
eventually.
eventually.
Do you want me in on this?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
We could
yes.
do it again. Yes.
Okay.
All right. 3, 2, 1. We
We
will
will
come
come up
with an
with an
With an
outro
outro eventually.
eventually.
All
Perfect.
right. Thanks.
Perfect.